In teaching the properties of sound to my ninth grade physical science students, I have found that, like many high school science students, they do not relate to the information, and thus they do not internalize it. Wavelength and frequency are abstract concepts that they cannot see, and they don't know how to apply or use this information. By using Audacity, a voice recording software, my students will be able to see a visual representation of their own voices, and by manipulating them, hopefully not only make a connection with the material, but recognize its importance in defining their environment. By using the cognitive approach that learning activities should encourage students' discovery of principles and concepts, I created this assignment for my students, presenting it as a screencast so that they could follow the directions in real time, pausing when needed. We're going to use Audacity today to analyze our own voices and understand how frequency and wavelength are related to pitch. So let's go ahead and get started. We had an Audacity's tutorial last week where the students were allowed to explore the technology and familiarize themselves with it so that they would be comfortable using it for this assignment. In any case, if they are unsure of any of the features we explored, there is a link that pops up during the assignment screencast that allows them to refer back to the Audacity tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and hitting the record button here. I want to record for about 3 seconds. So it'll start here and you'll see the cursor moving. And I want to do about 3 seconds worth. I'm going to start with a high pitch. Okay, and now we're going to bring the cursor here. Okay, at the end of that one, and we're going to record a medium pitch. I run my students through 3 different recordings of their voice in different pitches, and then we're going to go ahead and manipulate them. Beginning of it, and project, you're going to hit align tracks, align with 0, and then we're going to go ahead and do that with the third one as well. Projects, align tracks, align with 0. Now we want to rename these so we don't make a mistake. So this first one, high pitch. I always find it useful to give my students tips for organization. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to select between 1 and 2 seconds. We have 1 second of sound, and by hitting this button here, it's going to zoom to that section. We're going to do that once again, so zoom. So now we have 0.1 second, and we'll zoom into that. Here I teach the students how to adjust the waves so that they can more easily count the wavelengths. And then we zoom in one more time to 0.01 seconds. Now what we want to do is count the wavelengths of each one. Now remember that a wavelength is the full wave until it gets back to the same spot. So that would be one wavelength right there. You'll notice that this isn't exact. It's because when our voices have a lot of different vibrations in them, as we discussed earlier. So we're going to more or less do it. That's 1, 2. As we have learned the definitions of the various terms and phrases related to sound already, the students are now going to apply that information to their own voices. I am lucky to teach in a very tight community and have open communication with my students' parents. With such a small class, I was able to make a contract with each of the parents to ensure that the students had access to a computer and the internet at home when necessary. And in this case, I made sure that they all downloaded Audacity to the computers last week. After recording their own voices in several different pitches, the students were led through a series of exercises on Audacity that would allow them to count the wavelengths in a certain time frame and then compare them to the wavelengths of the different pitches. Using what they had learned about the relationship between the wavelength and the frequency, they then had to predict what would happen when they increased the frequency of their recording or decreased it. Not only did they get a chance to discover the principles for themselves, but they enjoyed manipulating the sound of their voices by simply changing the number on the screen. Through this repurposing of Audacity, the students will take an abstract concept the idea of sound traveling as invisible waves, and make a visual representation of their own voices so that they can identify and change different pitches of their voice by manipulating the frequency. Thus, they will have made a connection with the material and hopefully recognize the role of that information in their everyday lives.